In Development Debates, we'll discuss issues shaping the future and present of China. Today, our debate topic is if Hollywood should cater to Chinese audiences. The Chinese box office has become the second biggest in the world, and Hollywood studios are noticing. If you look closely at the box office movies that have large production and advertising budgets, then you'll notice slight changes that make the movies more China-friendly. We will look into 9 films that made changes with Chinese audiences in mind. The film research came from Box Office Mojo and Todd Cunningham of The Wrap. In the movie Gravity, starring Sandra Bullock and George Clooney, a Chinese space shuttle was chosen to take an important role in the film. Also, a Russian ship was responsible for a technical error that led to the release of debris in space that put the lives of the main characters at risk. But that Russian shuttle was said to originally be Chinese. Our second film is Iron Man 3. The movie was co-produced by the China-based film company DMG. For the release in China, a whole separate side story was added to it. They added 2 Chinese movie stars who played a heart surgeon and a nurse in the film. The actors were Fan Bingbing and Wang Xueqi. The scene was critically panned. It was also teased online for its blatant Ely milk product placement. It's been reported that there were still multiple problems with the co-production, but the film did incredibly well in Chinese theaters. According to BoxOfficeMojo.com, the film brought in $120 million of its total $1.2 billion box office earnings in mainland China alone. One of the reasons Iron Man succeeded was because of the co-production. It helped it plan early on for an early release date, avoid political problems, and market the film. Our third movie is The Karate Kid, starring Jackie Chan. The star of the film is a young African-American boy. In it, he gets into a fight with Chinese school children. In the Chinese version of the film, they made sure to have the Chinese children fight, but only after being provoked. Our fourth film is Red Dawn. It was based on the novel by Tom Clancy, and it's centered around a fictional war between the US and China. China was replaced with North Korea in the film. Despite the change, the film wasn't even released in Chinese theaters. Our fifth movie is James Bond's Skyfall. There were scenes set in China, which were likely added to add an exotic feel to the film. It also made Shanghai look like an exciting city, which was likely made with Chinese audiences in mind. A scene where a Chinese guard is killed was edited from the film. The film brought in $60 million in mainland China. The sixth film is Cloud Atlas. Despite having a large marketing campaign in China, it still had to deal with cuts to the film. The total cuts removed about 40 minutes from it, due to explicit scenes with mature content. The film managed to bring in $27 million in mainland China. This is particularly amazing because it had similar results in the US. Our eighth film is Men in Black 3. There was a scene in a Chinese restaurant in New York. It had few scenes that didn't put ethnic Chinese people or food into the best light. Those scenes also didn't make it into Chinese theaters. Our ninth and final film is The Titanic, starring Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. The film was hugely popular in China. It broke box office records, bringing in $43 million, and it did all this without a certain mature scene. Of our 9 example films, all had varying levels of box office success in China. It seems that even if cuts and changes to the film were made, then films would still perform on a level similar to that they performed worldwide. Granted, there were some obvious exceptions. Some problems might keep the film from being shown at all. One is if a film doesn't get onto the list of 34 foreign films. Another is if their content is relatively explicit, offensive, or too political for Chinese audiences. While it makes sense for foreign films to keep Chinese audiences in mind, they need to be careful not to compromise the integrity of their films too much. Finding that balance led to problems for Quentin Tarantino's Django. The Chinese version of his film led to bizarre problems in its opening weekend in mainland China. Throwing in scenes specifically pleased Chinese audiences has had mixed success for some films, like Iron Man and Looper. Even though they both make good sums of money in the country, the quality of the films became a question. Being over-concerned about overseas audiences might have been a reason for it. But some films are trying other ways to work with China in mind. The movie Pacific Rim was a film relying on its visual effects. Its visual effects were made by a Beijing-based visual effects company. The film had several roles for Chinese people. Even though the main characters are American and Japanese, it still managed to make more in China than in the US. In China, it brought in $111 million, which is $10 million more than it made in the US. There are obvious benefits to catering to Chinese audiences. The films that do this will have a higher likelihood of making money in mainland China. But if a film needs to compromise too much, then it might have to find other options for reaching this goal.